So I've got a little bit of a theory that I kind of developed over the years, and that is what got you here is not necessarily what's going to get you there. And more specifically with startups, what happens is that the culture shifts a lot in the early stages, right?
Itamar, Novick, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Michael, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I am so excited to learn over these next 20 minutes what it means to scale businesses, to raise venture capital. You've raised over $270 million yourself of venture capital funds, besides being an early stage investor through Recursive Ventures and being a venture partner at Upwest and J Ventures. And if I begin to say everything that you've done, I'm not going to end there. Itamar, give me a brief rundown of who you are, what are you passionate about, and let's move from there.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. So I'm an operating investor, which means that I have a day job during the day, and that is the chief business officer at Life360, a company I helped take public last year in the Australian Stock Exchange for a valuation of over $600 million.
Wow.
And at night and on weekends, I manage Recursive Ventures, which is a seed fund that I've raised myself, and I've been investing in startup companies at the pre-seed and seed stage for the last 8 or 9 years.
Incredible. Okay, hold on. What is chief business officer? I know what a chief executive officer, a chief financial officer. What is the chief business officer?
So I think it's a little bit up for interpretation. Different companies use that title sparingly for different things. Specifically for Life360, being a consumer business, a B2C business, I'm really the person that manages most of the business development opportunities with different partners, creating an ecosystem of partners and other parties that want to engage with us, and also doing what's called corporate development, which is mostly M&A, and that's us acquiring potentially smaller companies to sort of expand our product line or help with our talent in the company.
Incredible. So you're moonlighting as a pre-seed and seed investor, yet you're helping formulate business propositions and M&As for companies that go public, like Life360. Is there a dissonance between the two?
Is there what? Sorry?
Like a dissonance, a clear distinction, because it sounds like two different worlds.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, I do a lot of context switching, but really the underlying sort of thread that connects it all is I just love helping entrepreneurs, right? So I found early on in my career that I'm okay as a CEO. I can run a company, but I'm actually better at supporting CEOs, supporting entrepreneurs running companies. So really, when it comes to when you think about value creation in entrepreneurship and in VC-backed scalable startups, often at some point you'd either think about fundraising, right, to basically accelerate scaling up the business, or you'd think about potentially acquiring other companies that can help you sort of do that even faster, scaling the business, or you'd think about going public or selling your company. And those are places where I think if you've got a lot of collective experience across different pieces that add up to the startup ecosystem, whether it's product, marketing, technology, and of course adding finance on top of that, you can really add a lot of value when you've got this cross-disciplinary view of things. And that's really what I bring to the table because of my background being, engineering, product, hands-on operations, business development, and also funding and finance.
Okay, so if you had to guess, how many entrepreneurs have you helped over the years?
Honestly, probably hundreds. I have a rule, by the way. I have a rule which I'd like to share with you in the audience here.
Please.
Whenever I engage with entrepreneurs, I just have so much sympathy for what they're going through because I've done it myself. And I just try to find a way to help. Even if it's one small thing, I might promise to the founders that I talk with, if you're spending your time with me, you're very valuable at that. I'll find at least one way to help you and hopefully more.
But you can't help. You can't be with every entrepreneur. I mean, your time is incredibly valuable, incredibly scarce. So how do you choose who do you work with and who do you not work with?
That's a great question. So unfortunately, like other VCs, I do have to filter out so I can focus on what I think are opportunities that have the highest propensity or biggest chances to make an impact on on me as an investor and of course on the founders and on society, right? So I've got to sort of pick and choose which battles I want to fight. And I do that, using the skills that I've learned as an institutional VC from some of the best in the business when I work in more entire ventures. I sort of learn how to evaluate opportunities, and I try to focus my time on what I believe is the best opportunities. With that said, I think in this business, in venture capital, you really have to create value for people around you in your network. You've got to make an impact also for your companies. So I try to do the best that I can and free up as much time as I can, manage to free up to really help people in my network.
Of course. Okay, so hundreds of entrepreneurs that you've helped. Are there more similarities or differences that you've seen? Because then obviously everybody's crazy. That's like the number one similarity. But more tangibly, are there more differences or similarities?
It's funny that you say most entrepreneurs are crazy. I actually think the best entrepreneurs are amazing in mitigating risk because startups are so risky to begin with that really a lot of good founders, what they know how to do well is like, okay, we've got those 10 different risk vectors in our business. How do we reduce it down to one, right? Because startups are so risky. So I think I've seen a lot of different entrepreneurs, and I also invest in entrepreneurs out here in the Bay Area and entrepreneurs across the U.S. with some focus on Israeli entrepreneurs. Probably 35% of my
Wow.
portfolio is what I call Israeli companies, which typically means that they've been started by an Israeli entrepreneur here in the U.S.
Is there a
So
specific
I'd say
reason for that, by the
entrepreneurs
way?
come.
Why
Sorry.
that focus?
Well, first of all, I'm Israeli, and I moved to the States a little bit over 10 years ago. So naturally, culturally, it's easier for me to relate to Israelis, right?
Right.
And also because I believe in the Israeli startup ecosystem. I think we're just getting started, right? With Israelis back in Israel doing amazing work across different fields, machine learning, cybersecurity, so on and so forth. There's so much more opportunities back in the Holy Land. That's one. And the second thing, I've seen and I've worked with so many successful, resourceful, creative, amazing entrepreneurs, Israeli entrepreneurs here in the US. So I think it's actually an advantage that I have that I'm, pretty easily able to tap into Israeli entrepreneurs and sort of help them scale their companies.
Incredible, incredible. And I mean, you are very active with both Upwest Labs and J Ventures, and I'm probably missing a bunch of others that are very involved with the Israeli or Jewish ecosystem. So that definitely shows. Scaling a startup, you're mentioning that a lot of entrepreneurs are saying that they're able to mitigate the risk or the various risks that they have, but at the end of the day, like 99.9% of startups fail. So how do you so where do you see that you're seeing a lot of early stage entrepreneurs coming in before even a pre-seed or a seed? I mean, most of them are gonna fail. What is the distinction that you see? What are the common themes of those that end up able to raise that capital that gets them to where they need to get to or don't?
That's a great question. So there's no science here, right? There is directional thinking on what me personally and other folks in the industry believe that works. So I think at the early stages, there's three things that I really want to focus on, which is the quality of the team and how fit is that team to solve the specific problem. TAM, total addressable market, which is a huge deal for VCs, and it should be a huge deal for entrepreneurs as well, because you don't want to go after a small opportunity that's not necessarily VC scalable and sort of try to win that way with all you can. So TAM is I think a really important one that entrepreneurs sometimes miss and should pay more attention to. And the last I would say, which is not always easy for investors to speak up and talk about that, is what I call fundability. So how you sometimes it's really hard to turn down first reactions. There's something there, right? If you want to succeed in sort of the VC startup game, you've got to be fundable. And on top of all the other things that I think about when I think about investing in pre-seed and seed companies, I really do have to take into account whether this people, this company, this story would be able to scale to more and more investors that would put bigger checks into the company to scale it up.
So what you're saying is that as an early stage investor, you're looking at a company. You're not just saying, is this company able to use my money wisely to get to a product or to get to their first customers, but are they able to then use that momentum and raise their Series A, their Series B from institutional investors, and which is sort of one of the biggest tests, right, for startups. Are they able to get past that big first institutional funding and propel that growth?
And I think having that funding and having better and smarter people around the table to help you as an entrepreneur, scale your startup is extremely important. Which is why also for me as a VC, I believe that's where VCs can add most value. Make sure that your companies are well funded. That's probably the single thing that VCs can do to help their entrepreneurs most. Of course, there's many other things, but that would be the first that I would look into.
Yeah, I just had a fascinating conversation with also somebody from J Ventures who's really well known for crisis management and coming into companies who need help when they're not able to necessarily raise another round and maximize the value of their assets. And one of the things that he mentioned is that the real value that the board members and the VCs can provide is grounding the founders and making sure that they understand in the high level of what they need to do, how much funding they need, how do they raise that funding, and make sure that their product that their company lives on. What's happening today in terms of raising money? Because as a young entrepreneur, it's very confusing. A lot of people are saying only raise how much you really need, save the equity, focus on the business, don't focus on your ego. A lot of others are saying raise as much as you can because we don't know what's happening tomorrow. There might be such a thing as COVID-19 and you're not going to be able to raise that funding from March until May. So where are you on the spectrum of thought?
I'd probably, I'm very entrepreneurial friendly. So I'd probably say raise as much as you can, but not too much.
Okay, so explain that.
I think having more capital to work with and basically enabling you to have more room for mistakes. And a lot of startups are really this journey inside the founder and the founding team's head of like, how quickly do you understand how to position your market, your product, how to brand and sell and operate and scale your business. And it's really that journey where you have to learn all those things. Is the quicker you do it, the more value you create, right? The faster you create that value. So having more capital enables you to potentially accelerate that journey. And that's of course is extremely important. But on the other hand, having too much capital, and we've seen some of this with some of the SoftBank vision funds, where we've seen the situations of overcapitalization that basically leads to mistakes, right? Because it's easy to solve problems with money, but often that is not the right solution for problems. Often maybe you have the wrong team members, or you got the wrong business model, or maybe you've got the wrong go-to-market, right? And pouring more money on that problem actually doesn't fix it. It masks the real underlying issue. So raise as much money as you can to give you as many bullets in that gun to shoot and aim and try to hit your target, but not too much that you can't become undisciplined.
I think that's fascinating. This idea that money can solve a lot of problems, especially early on, and it's almost blind the organization into masking some of the real underlying problems, because at the end you want to be lean, you want to be efficient, you want to maximize your product and not just use money to let's say I want to get to 1 million views on this show. I can pay $1 million for advertisements to get 1 million viewers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that my product is good or that I'm doing something useful.
It's not a business. You actually lost money.
Actually,
that's not a good business.
that's definitely not good business. But if I'm able to do this with $100, then we know that there's something here that with $1 million I can actually scale this in a very healthy way.
Right. When you think about it, a lot of VCs these days, they're really focused on scaling up. Means that there's already some level of product market fit. Maybe it's really good. And where you need the majority of capital is when you're really scaling up, like going from 5 salespeople to 50 salespeople. That requires investment ahead of time to really hire those people, train them, make them effective, right? If you're early on in the kind of the first innings of coming up with your company, whether it's a B2C or a B2B company, I'd actually say, it's not about the money. It's about like really coming up with your thesis, having an MVP, getting out there, testing stuff. You don't need 100 people and tens of millions of dollars to be able to do that, to get that validation.
Sure. So, you've seen quite a few entrepreneurs go in and scale their product or scale their business from 5 salespeople to 50 salespeople. What are the factors that are gonna sort of make or break you, or what do I need to keep in mind later on? This is a very selfish advice that I'm asking for now. What do I need to keep in mind as a young entrepreneur as I will attempt to scale my business from 5 customers to 50 customers?
That's a very interesting question. So I've got a little bit of a theory that I kind of developed over the years, and that is what got you here is not necessarily what's going to get you there. And more specifically with startups, what happens is that the culture shifts a lot in the early stages, right? So, early on, it's like two gals and a dog, right? Sitting in some basement maybe, and they're trying to come up with something and come up with a business plan. And that kind of scales all the way to 5, 10, 20 people. But once you get to a point where there's like managers and people reporting to them, let's say at the 20 to 30 people range, something breaks, something changes with the culture. The lines of communication become longer and more complicated, and seeking and getting alignment within the team takes more energy, and that's fine. So there's that breaking point. Then there's another breaking point somewhere between the 50 to 80 employee range, where again, you've got even longer lines of communication. Things are more complicated. Suddenly you have 20 people meetings where everybody has to nod their heads and say, yeah, this is awesome, and then you can get going. So that's another breaking point. And there's typically another one at the 120 to 150 employee range. And then you're like a big company. You've got other company problems. So one of the things that entrepreneurs and even investors sometimes fail to recognize is that the same set of people that actually got you from, like 10 employees, 0 employees to 20 are not necessarily going to be the people that get you from 20 to 60. It requires a different type of leadership. And you have to, first of all, reflect on yourself as an entrepreneur and on your team, and who's really, the best person for the job at those different stages. And that's something that's not always easy for entrepreneurs to do as the business scales up.
I mean, I've heard this quite a few times. There are some points, and I believe Micha Kaufman from Fiverr, he gave an inspiring talk in one of the conferences I attended, and he mentioned that at every junction of Fiverr, he kept asking himself, am I still the right CEO to grow this company? Now that we're, hundreds or thousands of employees, this is a different company than when we were a couple of friends in a garage and just starting out. And it sounds like it's almost an impossible ask to go to an entrepreneur or a founder and say, hey, can you please ask yourself, are you still the right CEO to run this? And if not, can you please be honest and go to the side and let somebody else lead this?
And Micha is amazing. I love Micha. And he's actually he's one of those people that it's like the investor's dream of somebody who can start by himself and then manage 1,000 people after an IPO, right? There's people like that, but it's not everybody. And you have to really reflect, on yourself and understand. I mean, even for me, it was a journey. When I was younger, I was like, yeah, I'll be CEO and I'll be the best CEO ever. And you know what? That's not actually true. Over time, you learn what you're good at. And I'm really good at supporting entrepreneurs versus being an entrepreneur myself. So I think that kind of self-reflection can really go a long way for entrepreneurs.
Incredible. Itamar, what are you passionate about? What industries, what type of entrepreneur, what's like really gets you out of bed in the morning?
So I'm actually more of a generalist, to be honest with you. I do have specific areas and theses that I focus on. I invest in consumer technologies, but not like e-commerce and sort of media, more services on the consumer side. I invest in data and machine learning tools and capabilities all the way across the stack, from infrastructure, deploying, developing different types of data and machine learning services, to actually services in financial services and real estate and other verticals where you can use data to disrupt antiquated businesses. And then I also do a little bit of sort of emerging tech, right? Where I've dumped them in stuff like mobility, for example, IoT, and other areas. And it's interesting because when I look at my track record of success, right? Like my biggest wins as an investor, Life360 IPO, Credible IPO, Ring sold to Amazon for over $1 billion, right? Automatic sold to SiriusXM. When I think about some of those opportunities, they weren't thesis driven. I sort of, recognized a strong entrepreneur pursuing a great opportunity and kind of learned and adopted in the process of engaging with them and kind of built my thesis on the go when I did that. And that's worked really well for me.
Right. And that's inspiring. One thing I have to ask, entrepreneurship, a lot of times as a founder, it seems you get a lot of no's, you get a lot of suspicion, you get a lot of rejections, right? For every 99 VCs that say no, for every one VC that says yes, you might get 99 that say no. How can founders be really open to really important advice, or be, mindful of this advice when they're constantly hearing rejections and no's? How can entrepreneurs, filter out the good and the bad and really take in the important stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And when I think about CEOs in startup companies, tech startup companies, they have two jobs that matter most to me. One is fundraising, and the other one is creating a vision for the company that aligns everybody, every stakeholder in the company. Those are the two most important things. And I think if you're not the right person to raise capital from investors, then I think in the early stages you probably shouldn't be the CEO, right? Because that's something that the CEO is expected to do. Like your team is counting on you. So it's a little bit salesy, to be honest with you. Like you have to reach out to a lot of people. It's a process. It's like a sales process, right? It's a partnership process. You're looking for a funding partner for you on this journey, and getting no's is really important. And learning from those no's, actually getting valuable feedback, finding ways to get valuable feedback, finding ways to keep engaging with some of the investors. Who knows? Maybe it hasn't worked this time around, but it will work next time around, right? That could be great. And kind of elegantly being able to build your investors network even through those no's is actually pretty critical for a startup CEO. One way that I always chat about with my entrepreneurs is often VCs would give you very vague answers on why they chose not to invest in your company. And I think your goal as an entrepreneur is to try to get to the bottom of what's happening, even if it's not something that's comfortable for you to hear as a founder, right? One of the best ways of doing that is really back channeling and circling back to those VCs through the people that introduced you to them and trying to understand if you can get some more information there. Another good way that I sometimes recommend is, it's actually pretty good if you've got two founders in a meeting with VCs where one, the CEO is just talking because they're the ones that are really leading. But, another one could be in the background, sort of more taking notes and just like looking at people's reactions. Right?
I love that.
Like what resonates, what doesn't resonate. And it's really a different mindset because you're not pitching. You're there to really read the reactions in the room. And I've seen that being successful as well.
I love that so much. Itamar, right before we leave, I can't believe 20 minutes are almost over. These always go by way too fast. I need 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Can I use 3 words and 1 emotion?
100%.
Okay. So helping entrepreneurs.
I love it. And when you sent me that emoji through the email, it even looked better, but it was much cuter when you did it in person. So thank you. Love helping entrepreneurs. I look forward to reaching out as an entrepreneur myself to get some really important advice and sending you my slide deck. So I just love that we're forming this relationship, and thank you for all the inspiring work that you're teaching me through J Ventures, and thank you for being so generous with your time here.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this great initiative. I'm really excited about what you're doing. Great leaders all around. And thanks for having me, Michael.
Thank you very much. Toda rabba.
Stay safe out there.
Bye-bye.